Hi everyone, welcome to Yiddishland Pavilion, Yiddishland Pavilion Online. This is our sixth, I believe, or fifth online event of all our online program. My name is Maria Vates. I'm one of the curators of Yiddishland Pavilion, together with Evgeny Fix, whose face you'll see a little later, as he's going to be presenting the panel. I want to briefly introduce Yiddishland Pavilion. I'll share my screen and just tell you a little bit about the project, so that for those who are joining us for the first time, would have a better idea what it is. So Yiddishland Pavilion is an official and the first representation of Yiddishland at the Venice Biennale this year. It's a hybrid pavilion. It's existing both in the virtual space and also in Venice. It's the first transnational pavilion that kind of aims to trace and activate and highlight artistic practice that deals with contemporary Yiddish and Jewish discourse. And as Yiddishland is very much connected to the map of Europe and global map, of course. So the Yiddishland Pavilion takes place in the dialogue and collaboration with the national pavilions at the Biennale. Pavilions of Poland, Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, the US, Canada, and many more. And since we're both online and offline, our projects are also kind of the same nature. Some of them can be experienced at the Biennale. For instance, the project called Pseudo Territory is a soft intervention into the German pavilion. It's an AR sculpture that can be seen at the German pavilion, but can also be viewed from any part of the world, because that's a very accessible for those who have a phone. Author project that you can see and experience, not only see, but mostly hear, is an audio walk through 8 national pavilions that traces the journey of modernist artist Yonah Fine, who in his life was moving a lot and who was in exile a lot. And his journey can be traced through the project of Evgeny Fix. And also a new way of looking at these national pavilions and the connections between them. Other projects are projects of photography, videos that can also be experienced either on your laptop at home in a very comfortable atmosphere, or if you go to the Biennale, you can just using your phone, see this video, see this photography projects, read the text, and kind of, experience the Biennale through the Yiddishland Pavilion lens. Our contributors are very different professionals coming from multiple disciplines: scholars, curators, artists, performers, historian, architects. And all together, we're trying to understand what contemporary Yiddishland is, what is the artistic representation of contemporary Yiddishland. And we're doing so also through the online events program that this event is a part of. So every month we have about 2 events that explore Yiddishland from different perspectives. And today our theme is intersection of queerness and Yiddishkeit. And Evgeny Fix, my co-curator, will speak about the panel more, and he will introduce all the speakers. Jenya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Masha. Thanks everyone for joining us today for today's event titled Gendered Yiddishlands Beyond the Borders of a Nation, Gender and Sexuality, with Faith Jones, Tobaron Waxman, and Zohar Weiman-Kelman. Over the course of the last several decades, there have been a major feminist and queering transformation happening in the field of Yiddish culture, having their roots in and or coinciding with movements for women's and gay rights since the 1970s globally, and in North America in particular, By the 1990s, queer and feminist Yiddishkeites became very powerful and noticeable streams in contemporary Yiddish creativity and research. The formation of the new post-vernacular Yiddish culture that began in the 1970s historically was influenced by and cannot be separated from wider identity politics gains, including a growing awareness of the impact of gender and sexuality on culture and knowledge productions. Since then, a great number of projects, both artistic and academic, made daring strides toward uncovering the written out history works by Yiddish women writers and historical Yiddish queer and proto-queer personas, as well as the articulation of present-day Yiddish female and queer experiences. Gender and sexuality finally became not only legitimate topics, but some of the major topics of contemporary Yiddish art, culture, and research. Feminist and queer Yiddishkeits question the traditional boundaries of sexuality and gender as much as they transcend the borders of nation states. Zohar Weiman-Kelman, a senior lecturer in the Department of Foreign Literatures and Linguistics at Ben-Gurion University, will discuss queer Yiddishkeits beyond borders, and will look at Yiddish poetry and art practice as sites of transgression, undoing borders of nations, time, genre, and gender. Where exactly do queer and feminist Yiddishlands are located, geographically and spatially? Faith Jones, a librarian, researcher of Yiddish culture, and translator of the poetry of Celia Dropkin, and Shira Gorshman will address the intersection of queerness and Yiddishkeit on the streets of Yiddishland, that is geographically, and will provide us with an answer today. There is a long tradition in contemporary Yiddish art and writing of artists going back and reconnecting with countries of origin of their Yiddish ancestors in Eastern Europe. But what happens when a Jew's relationship to the ancestral homeland located in an Eastern European nation is complicated by the nation's homophobic or transphobic state laws? Tobaron Waxman, a Canadian artist, curator, and performer, will discuss former and current artistic projects, including gender diasporas and interdisciplinary which outlines the absurdity of the oppressive gender laws and unpacks the relationship of the state to the gendered body. And today I would like to, and right now I would like to introduce our first speaker, Faith Jones. Faith Jones is a librarian, translator, and researcher of Yiddish culture in Vancouver. She is a member of the Digital Yiddish Theater Project and is a co-translator of the Acrobat, a selection of the poetry of Celia Dropkin. Her research of Yiddish language activism in Winnipeg and Vancouver has been published in scholarly journals. The translations of the short stories of Soviet Yiddish writer Shira Gorshman is due out from White Goat Press in late 2022. And she created super titles for the National Yiddish Theater, Volksbühne, production of Kadi Maladovsky, genre-defying futurist play Alle Fenster zu der Sonne. She's currently working with Anita Norwich and David Mazower on a collection of primary documents related to Yiddish women writers. Please, Faith.
Thank you so much, Yevgeny. And it's so delightful to be here today with all of you. So, so just to introduce what I'm going to be working on with you today. So I've been in in and around Yiddish for about 26 years or so. And in that time, I have probably been asked dozens of times, what is this intersection between queerness and Yiddish? Why are there so many queer people involved in Yiddish? What is the interest for queer people in Yiddish? And I have given a variety of answers to this question and changed my answer almost every time I've been asked. And I remain unsure of what the intersection is between queerness and Yiddishkeit. And so today, together, we are going to find these intersections. We are going to physically locate the intersection of queerness and Yiddishkeit. And we're going to do that together as a group. And I'm going to show you how. This is a Google Docs spreadsheet, which you will be able to help me fill in, and I have already filled in my answers to these questions, and we will use these answers to build a map, which will physically locate queer Yiddishkeit. So the question is up here. There's an explanation below it, and then you can put in your answer below. And here's mine. My Yiddish name is Nomi. Where I come from is Vancouver. My favorite thing about queerness is destroying gender expectations. My favorite thing about Yiddish is that it refuses to die. And what these two things have in common is defiance. All of these fields are optional. If you don't feel like filling them in, you don't have to. This is the one we actually need. This is an intersection that embodies the idea that I put in the previous column. I chose the intersection of Hastings and Maine in Vancouver. I see there are quite a few people from Vancouver in the audience, and they're probably thinking right now, Hastings and Maine is not a queer space and it's not a Jewish space. So why is it that that is the intersection of queerness and Yiddishkeit? And I think it's because it embodies this idea, the idea of defiance. Hastings and Maine, for people who know Vancouver, is the epicenter of the poorest neighborhood in Canada. And it is a place where people build community in defiance of a tremendous number of difficulties. And so to me, this is what I think of when I think about queerness and Yiddishkeit. And finally, I gave the Yiddish place, my place, a Yiddish name. The name I chose was Morgen, meaning tomorrow. And so to me, that is part of what this building of community is about. So what I would like to do is to invite all of you to fill in this spreadsheet, and I am about to drop the link to it in the chat. And you will all be able to add to this spreadsheet. I'm going to ask you to try not to type over anybody else. So go into a fresh line and start putting in your answers. If you want to be safe, you can always choose a line further down so that you aren't going over top of anybody else. Does anybody have any questions about what I'm asking you to do? I see some people coming into the spreadsheet, which is fantastic. And you can just go ahead and start putting in any of the answers that you have. And if there's any column that you don't feel like you want to answer, you definitely don't, except for that column F. In order for your place to be to show up on our map, there has to be something in column F. Somebody's asking, is it okay to fill it out later? You can definitely do that, or you can think about it. You can start filling it out and continue to think about it as the event goes on. I will show you at least a first try at the map before we finish up today. So if you don't get anything put in today, then you won't see it at the end of our event. But if you want to add something later, I can always update the map later. And okay, so some people have just joined, so I'm going to go over the spreadsheet again for people who are just joining us. What we are doing right now is we are mapping the intersection of queerness and Yiddishkeit. And so what I've invited everybody to do, everybody who wishes to, is to contribute to this shared spreadsheet. I will once more share the link so the people who've just come in can see it. And you should have the ability to go into this spreadsheet and add your own answers to these questions. At the top are the questions, and right below it is an explanation. So you asked to put in your Yiddish name if you have one, where you come from, your favorite thing about queerness, your favorite thing about Yiddish, and then to think of something that those two things have in common. And finally, to put in an intersection that embodies that idea. This does have to be a real place, unfortunately. We can only map places that exist. I should have mentioned before, please put this in using the Roman alphabet. Finally, there's a Yiddish place name. You can decide on a place name, on a name for the place that you have chosen in Yiddish. You can put that in Yiddish or any alphabet you like. The only one of these columns which we actually must have for this to work is column F. You may leave out any of the other columns. You don't have to fill in anything in particular. And it's wonderful to see so many ideas already coming into this spreadsheet. And to see people with sort of having different thoughts about places that seem to cohere around this idea of an intersection of queerness and Yiddish. So I'm seeing lots of things happen. It's amazing. It's amazing. All kinds of people in all kinds of different places. That's delightful. So what we will end up with is a map that really is transnational, like Yiddish itself. And I want to give people a couple of minutes to continue to fill this out, especially to get things into column F, where we need that intersection. And is there anything else I need to clarify? Please just jump in if you have anything you'd like me to clarify or tell you. Yevgeny, have you filled it out? Oh, you're muted.
I'm working on it, yes.
Ah, okay, you're working on it.
So
Zoe, are you?
I'm a little bit lower in the list.
Ah, okay, well, there you are. Okay, there's people all the way through here, so that's fantastic. What is the Yiddish word for lake? It is ozera, somebody is asking. I'm going to put it in the chat. And I can put it in the chat in Yiddish as well.
For a place, I put a square, or it's like Platz. Does that count, or does it have to be 2 streets?
I guess we'll find out.
Okay.
So what's going to happen is when we've all filled it out, is that I will be downloading this information and then uploading it into a map, and we'll see what the map can map, what it can work with. So put in what you want, and we will do our best to make it happen. It may be that I have to, for places that are maybe harder for the mapping function to figure out, I might have to put in latitude and longitude, so we might not necessarily see those places today. But put in what you want, what you feel, what feels good to you, and we'll make it happen one way or another. All right. So while people are still filling that out, which is, it's looking great, it's looking amazing. While people continue to fill that out, I think we can move on. So we're going to let you, you can continue to think about it as the other speakers are speaking. And in a few minutes, I'll download what's there. Does that all work?
I
Do
think so.
people need another few minutes, or it looks like people are doing pretty well, actually? I think we're good to go.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thanks so much.
Can I ask you then to stop sharing your screen, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Super. And I'll thank you very much for this very intriguing beginning of the panel. I very much look forward to the map, and I'm super happy that everyone took such an active part in filling in the spreadsheet. I now would like to invite our and introduce our next speaker, Zohar Weiman-Kelman. They are a senior lecturer in the Department of Foreign Literatures and Linguistics at Ben-Gurion University in Israel. Zohar received a PhD in comparative literature from the University of California, Berkeley, and were a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Jewish Studies and the Women and Gender Studies Institute at the University of Toronto. Zohar was a fellow at the Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies and an associate scholar at the Humanities Forum on Sex, both at the University of Pennsylvania. Their first book, Queer Expectations and a Genealogy of Jewish Women's Poetry, was published by SUNY Press and in 2018. So, and Zohar will focus today on Yiddish poetry, and we'll discuss queer Yiddishkeit beyond borders. And we'll also look at art practices as sites of transgression that kind of go beyond borders of nations and territories. So Zohar, we're very happy to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm beyond delighted to be here, and I think this embodies so beautifully how queer Yiddishland is, having us all here together at once, and special for me to have people from different times in my life, also different places. And I think, yeah, we're living it now. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm extra taking advantage of this opportunity to not just talk academically, as I often do, about my poetry, but also to share some of my early artwork. So from 15 years ago, a project I did called Jew Wandering, my Yiddish drag king Shabbosdik. But I have to start with a poem. And it is what I call, the queerest Yiddish poem, if not the queerest poem ever. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
So it's Anna Margolin's poem, Ich bin gewesen einmal ein Jüngling. I'll read it in Yiddish and then in English, with the assumption that some of you know it, but I think it brings us into the transgressive existence of Yiddishland as something that goes beyond borders, not just borders of space and nation, as the Yiddishland Pavilion so beautifully brings into being, but also crosses boundaries of gender, borders of time, self-other, Jew, non-Jew, etc. So, ich bin gewesen einmal ein Jüngling, gehört in Portikos Sokraten. Es hat mein Busenfreund, mein Liebling, gehabt dem schönsten Tolls in Athen. Gewesen Cäsar und a helle Welt, gebeut von Marmor, ich der Letzter, und Pfarrer Weib mir Oysterwelt, mein stolze Schwester. In Rosenkranz beim Wein bis spät, gehört in hochmutigen Frieden, wegen Schwachling von Nazareth, und wilde Meises wegen Jiden. I was once a boy, a stripling, listening in Socrates' portico. My bosom buddy, my sweet darling, had Athens' most beautiful torso. Was Caesar, and for marble constructed, a glistening world, I, the last there, and for my own wife selected, my stately sister. rose garlanded, drinking wine all night, in high spirits, here tell the news about the weakling from Nazareth and wild tales about the Jews. So to me, this is the epitome of explaining queer in general. By the way, it's from 1929, so just about the same time that Virginia Woolf is publishing Orlando. And much like Orlando, we have a protagonist who goes across genders and across time and geography. Who copied from who? I don't know. But we see here the speaker's queer gender, because we have this assumption, perhaps because it's a woman poet, we expect to see a female speaker. So that's one place where we have kind of our gender expectations played with. But then we have the two different erotic or romantic settings of the two first verses, right? We have the context of ancient Greek pederasty and the bosom buddy, the darling with the most beautiful torso. So that homoerotic setting is very historically based, also interestingly, historically accepted. At that point, it wouldn't be transgressive, but for a Jewish person or woman to have access into that space, that would certainly be transgressive and absolutely fantastic. And then from this image of the torso, we're kind of hurled into the next empire, the next phase of history, into Rome from ancient Greece. And I sense this movement also as being tied in some way to the body of the lover, because it goes to this world of marble, not just a marble torso. And here we have the choice of a wife. So the speaker has the power to choose a wife. By the way, those translators who didn't want it to be gender transgressive in the first section and made it a youth instead of a boy, got messed up in the second, because then the female speaker must choose a wife. So there's really no way to straighten out this poem, which I think is quite fantastic. And then what we make of this wife, is it a beloved of the Song of Songs, a sister in that sense? Is it an incestual bond? Is it a de-eroticized, socially legitimate bond? I think the poem leaves that open. And finally, in the last verse, we have the next phase in history just kind of revealing itself with the rise of Christianity, but it's not yet that rise. It's we have that very tense moment before where the Romans are still in a position to mock this weakling from Nazareth, Schwachling from Nazareth, and it's just such a fantastic way to both show the dominant perspective and put it in perspective, because of course the joke is on those who are laughing because the ultimate rise of Christianity. And I love the use of the term Schwachling, because it's also one that would be associated with the Jewish masculinity of Margolin's time. So itself not so straight, not quite masculine enough, pathologized, feminized. So Margolin puts herself with those mocking it above the Jewish men of her time, but also above Christian hegemony, all of these forces that she was actually subjected to in her life as a Jewish woman. And she creates for us this very queer version of history, of time itself, time that you can move effortlessly through, between, beyond, not hindered by biography, death, etc. And also a model of history in which we see that all powers are to some extent destined to fall. And of course, the future awaiting Margolin was less than bright. The future awaiting the Yiddishland centers that she came from, of Eastern Europe, of Warsaw, were to suffer a great destruction afterwards. Also, by the way, she's publishing this in New York the same year as the Great Depression begins. So we see also, capitalism falling. So it really is a poem that allows for Yiddish land, a Yiddish history that speaks freely in Yiddish, though it never was in Yiddish, but it could be, and I think opens up not an optimistic model exactly, because this history is not looking good, not looking back and not looking forward, and still it really gives her a voice as this youth, and a very queer voice at that. I'm trying to move slides. I just have a cover of my book because I always wanted to go with this poem, and I don't have a chance to show this image that was, it's called Lola de Valence, and it's a Magritte from 1948. And I just, this portrait of the bosom buddy. So had to share that. And from here, I want to actually move to talk about when I was once a youth, so 15 years ago, and my own adventures in Yiddishland, to refer to Jeffrey Chandler's wonderful book. And it's a project that began, actually, I was participating in a feminist summer camp in Poland, Feministyczna Akcja Letnia, with about 60 Polish feminists in tents in what used to be Galicia, near the border with the Ukraine. And I participated for the first time in my life in a drag workshop. And the first drag character that I came up with was very much reflecting my Israeli background, being Jerusalem born and raised. And I couldn't, bear to spend even an afternoon with him. He was, very aggressive and machoistic. And I tried to think to myself, what other models of masculinity might I connect to? And the image that I came up with was the somewhat troubling image of the boy with his hands up from the kind of visual archives of the Holocaust. But to me, it just stood in as a kind of extreme example of this Schwachling, to go back to Margolin's term, the weakling, a Jewish masculinity, Yiddish speaking, non-national, non-militaristic alternative. So I began this project. All of the clothing is thrifted in Poland with a lover. And my first performance was as a guest of the Warsaw-based drag king troupe, The Boys. And we traveled to Berlin together, to the big city, to perform. I years later found out that actually because they didn't know that I was Israeli, they presumed me to be Polish, and I was performing in Yiddish, a song by Chava Eidelstein, so also playing with the gendered voice of the singer, but they took the performance to be quite anti-Semitic, coming from someone from Poland rather than someone Jewish identified or from Israel. So that first performance was rather challenging. I got better at it as I went along. The image was captured by a photographer friend, Marta Bogdanska, who works in both Warsaw and Beirut. And this was just, if we could move the camera slightly, you would see just the regular Warsaw block that I was living in, a major apartment building. So this is not set up at all. There was just a little bit of junk behind me. And the image just kind of went back in time for me at the same time as I was producing this queer presence in a time in Warsaw where queerness was still just emerging out of the closet. It was the first bigger pride parades. Years later, they became much bigger, and this looked like queer Warsaw, looked like the scarcity of queerness in Warsaw looked like a thing of the past for a good number of years. And now the situation, I would say, is very much returned to very outspoken homophobia limitations. So again, going back to Margolin's poem, even in the short 15 years since the poem, we see a kind of queer rise and fall of certain possibilities there. I went from Warsaw to my hometown of Jerusalem, and there, the same outfit. Oh, here I have tzitzis. The first time I had to tie shoelaces together to make it look like tzitzis, because I did not find those in the thrift shops in Poland. But here on the way to this photographer friend, I stopped in a little Judaica store in downtown Jerusalem and said, I need tzitzis for someone about this size, pointing at myself, and I purchased my first tzitzis, and the experience there was very different because the orthodoxy of the image kind of belonged in contemporary Jerusalem. The image is also Jerusalem. It says, and behind, danger, here is being built. It's this Jerusalem that's fanatically aiming at the future, producing a very unjust, unequal future. And yet the drag king was both easily recognizable and invisible there. I was able to kind of pass with the other Orthodox images. So, and the coexistence of past, present, and future somehow made the most sense in Jerusalem. For me, it was also special. It was coming back for the first time queerly out to the place where I grew up. And it was a lot scarier than doing it in Poland. Actually, doing it in San Francisco was also somehow a lot scarier than doing it in Poland, but that might be another story. So this photograph was taken by Tamir Lederberg, a trans photographer now based in Berlin, but who's done a lot of work with the queer and trans community in Israel. And the final image was taken by my father, Rabbi Levi Weiman-Kelman, on Markham Street in Toronto, when I realized that kind of the stop in Yiddishland that I had missed was the most personal one. It was where my great-grandfather, my grandfather's family immigrated from Vienna, I'm originally from Galicia also, to Canada, and my great-grandfather being one of the early Hasidic rabbis there in Toronto before he passed away. And here suddenly this drag king is also, would be quite similar to my grandfather in 1928, arriving in Toronto. And this was also, again, we're beginning of 2008, so not so late in my own queer Yiddish coming out. So it was a point in which I said to my father, you don't want to take these pictures, I don't want you to take them, but we're just going to do it, because we had, 2 days in Toronto, and we did, and then we didn't talk about it for about a year. But since then, and the years that have passed, we're both very proud of them. And they're displayed in my parents' home, where I am right now in Jerusalem. So it's kind of a closing of that circle. So, so this is my, once I was a youth, this is my map of queer Yiddishland across time and space. And I think that's it. I have one more poem, but I might be out of time, so I can leave it for if we have time afterwards.
No, we're good. Please go ahead.
All right, so the final poem that I brought is one more Yiddish voice speaking in the voice of a male youth. That's my theme for, it's a Yiddishland bar mitzvah. And it's a poem by Irina Klepfish, a contemporary poet, but born in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I'll read it. Klepfish writes bilingually in English and Yiddish, influenced very much by the lesbian movement of the 1970s and Chicana lesbians like Gloria Anzaldúa. And this is a poem that she wrote during the first Intifada, speaking the voice of Palestinian youth in Gaza. And I'll read it how she wrote it. So first in English and then in Yiddish. Der Soine, the enemy, an interview in Gaza, Irina Klepfish. I live here with my family. The Jews come. I throw rocks. I yell out, Heil Hitler. My friend is shot with a rubber bullet. They take him to the hospital. He will live, but he's a cripple. My mother weeps. When will it end? Me? I'm happy school is closed. Who needs to study? I like to see them hide behind the walls. Down with the Jews. Long live Palestine. Ich wohn da mit der Mischpoche. Die Jiden kommen. Ich warf Steiner. Ich schrei Heil Hitler. A Freund wird geschossen mit a gummener Keul. Man nimmt ihm in Spital. Wird leben, aber wird sein a Kalike. Die Mame weint. Wenn wird es sich endigen? Ich Ich bin zufrieden, als die Schule ist vermacht. Was darf ich lernen? Es gefällt mir, wenn sie behalten sich unter die Wand. Nieder mit Jiden. Soll leben Palästina. So I'll juxtapose this with the Margolin poem. This poem is all present tense as opposed to that historical swoop. And it takes a very particular moment in history and brings Yiddish into it in a way that I think really reveals a lot of how power is working, how power is abused. And it's fascinating to me to see this, what Clubfish herself calls a kind of experiment to put a language of Jewish powerlessness in the mouth of somebody subjected to Jewish Israeli power. And so being a youth, as opposed to Margolin, who's writing herself into the center of power, here Clubfish is writing herself very much out of the center and allowing us a kind of different view, and allowing Jewish history to serve not only the Jewish nation, but to serve the liberation of Palestine in some way, in a way that I think can potentially, overly optimistic, but help people kind of have a shift in perspective to kind of see the potential of what happens in this radical identification and cross-identification. And I think in this, she produces a very strong political commentary that I think is very different than using Yiddish as nostalgia, leaving Yiddishland in the past. It's instead saying, Yiddishland is here and it's broken, let's fix it. So I leave you with this as a kind of more contemporary Yiddish call for justice. So that's it for now.
Thank you so much, Zohar, for the amazing presentation. And I love that kind of space between Margolin's poem and Klepfit's poem at the end, and your work in the middle, with which also unfolded over time, right, in three locales of Yiddishland. So it was amazing, and we actually today have a very strong Polish connection today, and very strong Canadian connection, right? In this this event today. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker today, Tobaron Waxman. Tobaron is an interdisciplinary artist and curator who sings. Tobaron uses a Jewish image vocabulary to grapple with questions of gender, nation, and the state, as well as questions of Semitic identity, migrancy, and houselessness, and the issues of border and embodiment, such as gender and racial passing. Tobaron sings Chazanot a cappella privately for queers and or object in hospitals, at funerals and weddings when others would not, as well as publicly in duet with the acoustics of architecture at historical sites of border conflict or ethnic cleansing. Developing theory of transvocality, Tobaron has performed at Camp Angel Festival of Choreography and Protest, Hamburg, Donau Festival, and Dixon Place, New York. Their work have been exhibited at such venues as Goethe Institute, Mumbai, Kunsthalle, Vienna, New Museum in New York City, and Brooklyn College Conservatory of Music. Without further ado, Tobaron, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? I'm sitting next to my friend Stas, who forgot to bring his headphones. So we have a little feedback. Please give me a gentle signal if we're having a Jimi Hendrix moment.
Sound is great.
Okay. I just did a performance that it just ended a few minutes ago in the building behind me. So you'll forgive me if I'm a little tired, and I'm just going to be a little more au naturel. That's ethnic for improvising. So so hello from the Altaheim. Also my mother is watching, and that's a key plot point. So I'm doing this project called Gender Diasporist. I coined this phrase, gender diasporist, as a way to talk about what was probably obvious to most of us in the audience here, but your audience is typically not Jews or Yiddishists. So diasporist is the sort of umbrella term that I've given to a research project, which has produced a series of actions that begins with me applying for Polish citizenship as an out transsexual person of Jewish Polish heritage through my matrilineal line. And I should explain, I have a Canadian birth certificate, which has an F on it, and I choose to keep it as such. But the rest of my ID is male ID. Here in Poland, when a trans person determines that they need healthcare and they need to get on with their lives in circumstances that require a name change, they have to go through a litigation process in terms of the gender confirmation law. Basically, your gender is determined by a trio of people who are not you. And they are, of course, the birth mother, the doctor who performed the birth, and the clerk who filled out the form. So by the time you have agency as a legal adult, the clerk is long gone. Who knows where the doctor is, but you still know who your mother is. So you have to take your mother to court and sue your mother for the so-called mistake that she made. And in this way, the state gets to punish the parents. Your case, if the parents are on board, you still have to do the court case. If the parents are not on board, your case can go on and on and on. And if your mother is no longer on the terrestrial plane, the court appoints a clerk, like a stunt double, to sit in her place, and you still have to do the court case. So I'm very interested in the ways that the state imposes itself on the body. As a first-generation Canadian, my mother having been born in what is now Belarus and was then Poland, I have basically two options for an address. I can either be a settler in Canada, or I can be a settler in Israel. So the project poses the question, where should a Jew live? And what if I chose neither of those two options? So in collaboration with trans activists here in Poland and human rights lawyers specializing in LGBTQI cases, I went ahead and applied for citizenship. And this is taking a long time because part of the integrity of the project, I pay for it myself. And I've mostly been doing this thanks to Canada Council arts funding. So thank you, Canada Council, for having the farsightedness to believe in my project. So it means that over the course of looking at governmentality and its limitations and the absurdity of this law, I've generated a lot of art as a way to track the whole process. This summer, I was artist in residence at Polin Museum of the History of the Jews of Poland. So I was developing choreography and performance, vocal performances of Yiddish poems that I've set to music, as well as some liturgy and some so-called women's songs. This is what the musicologists refer to as women's songs. In other words, Yiddish songs from the domestic environment. This is not my wording, but this is what they say. And from the motifs of travel and intimacy and yearning for a location that come up in some of these songs and poems, I develop movement vocabulary with a dancer. And in this case, I was working with a trans woman who performs in drag. So this was an opportunity for her to stretch her repertoire, to not be working with pop songs or popular anthemic songs. And she, as someone who connects herself with a Jewish identity in her own way, here as a Pole from Lublin, was very moved to have the opportunity to do something beyond the, shall we say, the expectations of what a drag performer or burlesque performer is given the opportunity to do. So we were developing this piece at the museum over the summer, and I don't want to be Lashon Haradik about it, so I'll just say at the last minute it was cancelled. In part because perhaps the people who do the scheduling don't understand how dance gets made and the kind of time that it takes. So some other art heroes here called Biennale Warszawa allowed us to use their space, which of course we can't map what we were doing from Polin onto this building behind me. But it also had interesting acoustics. And I've been developing theory around transvocality as what I call singing with architecture, not only in terms of the architecture of the vocalist and the trans body that produces that vocality and the grain of the voice, but also the circumstances in which acoustics are happening, because we're not living in a vacuum. So when I'm in duet with buildings, as what Evgenia was reading, in this case, the building is an abandoned shopping mall, and was in duet with the escalator and the sound of the revolving door, but it's fine, it's fine. Stas is laughing. So I basically just came off of doing a presentation of some of those research components for an audience that is very not Jewish, and yet people here seemed eager to hear about Yiddish being engaged with in a contemporary way, to look at contemporary issues as opposed to, you know, something sepia. So I can, how much time have I got left? Genya?
You
How
have
much time?
Tobaron, please go ahead.
I have a what?
You have time still, so if you need
Time.
like 10 minutes or something, you're
Okay.
very free to use this time.
Okay, so I'm just going to maybe show a couple of pictures. So are you seeing this properly? So those of us here watching or listening who have not had the opportunity to visit the Pauline Museum, it's a tremendous feat of architecture. It's won awards. You basically walk into this sort of giant vagina, and the acoustics are amazing. And I was a bit intimidated. Please don't read into that. But to be a solo singer in this giant cavern structure, you're going to be drowned in the structure. So this was before I realized I could bring in other components. So I moved the piece up to well, in Europe, it's the first floor, so up a floor. And if you can see my cursor, there's this little bridge that goes over that giant gulf that I previously referred to as the vagina. So from here, I can still sing songs, and my voice is resonating through the whole building. So I hope this isn't too abstract or hard to grasp, but this is the floor. This is the entire floor we're working with. This is a glass box that looks out onto a courtyard over here. In the glass box is projected images like so, various artifacts from all the media that this whole epic tale has generated. The hands should be Simona's hands, and she has these massive long claw-like fingernails in the trans flag colors. She uses these inks that I made to write a letter, compose a brivele, or whatever she's inspired to do, or paint onto these acetates that are images from all the footage and photography that I've shot over the course of this journey. At the opposite end of the very long hallway is an ethnobotanist who I worked with, and she is making inks, site-specific inks from locations that I stopped at, and locations that have resonance with this narrative. So in other words, rather than putting ingredients together to make homemade inks in the standard way where you'd be thinking, how do I make a blue? How do I make an orange? Rather, going to the place and see what color derives from the place. So I was able to generate a number of colors, and those would be painted and inked onto this other visual information. So the dancer has to travel all the way from over here, where the inks are being made, all the way to the other end, where the projection is happening onto this wall. While I'm singing songs here, some of it in Aramaic, some of it in Yiddish, all of it in an Ashkenazi accent. And the point was to show this kind of simultaneity that is typical of a trans experience. So in other words, if you're over here, you're going to see this, and you're going to hear me from around the corner. If you're over here, you're going to see me singing. If you're over here, you're with the scientist, and you have to choose what gets your attention at what time, and all of it is equally viable. One of the artifacts that I have is my mother's family passport. And this is me in the building at the bridge. If you do have the chance to come to Warsaw and visit this museum, it's a curious situation in terms of institutionality in this country, and the government rather quickly replacing all the curators with their own bureaucrats. And that's not a subjectivity, I'm saying that's actually what is happening here. So to visit this site before it changes even more is something that I encourage you to do. I learned recently that so first of all, this is my mother in white, and the other figure is her grandfather. And I recently learned that he was a dyer, and supposedly a very famous dyer who was very sought after in the region, that people would come from far and wide to dye their wool and other textiles with him. So that factored into how we use the inks and how I think about using the inks. I'm gonna stop that. What else can I say? I'm sitting in the street. I'm sorry, I sort of double parked. I'm sorry. It wouldn't have been like this. I would have had a normal PowerPoint, but the performance got canceled and then rescued, and today was the day. Can we hear you sing? I can try. Okay, just a little like queer epilogue. Okay. One of the songs that happens, you'll notice the floral motifs on my sexy frock. I designed the costumes myself and found a really smart tailor who was willing to work very fast. These are hand embroidered by men and boys in a tradition of embroidery from Kashmir that is handed down through families. And it's more often used for furnishings than for garments. But I had an exhibition in Mumbai and found these fabrics thinking about florals. I've never been comfortable to wear a flower print before. So this is a major first for me. Basically, I've tried to include for the Pauline version, because of the inks, some songs that involve natural motifs. One of the songs I think Saul, hi Saul, I think Saul helped to work on this years ago with me and Benji Fox Rosen. I was invited to sing at a couple of Annie Sprinkle's weddings. People here know who Annie Sprinkle is. The audience I just came from has no idea who Annie Sprinkle is. Anyway, so you all know the poem Frilling, and I tried to, as a conduit for the poem, to sing it using melody from a certain part of Hasidic chuppah, and I'm like in between languages here. I have a Polish friend sitting next to me, so I'm just talking only in English. I'm sorry. Yeah. So maybe some of you will recognize the melody from Weddings, but imagine that it's Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens getting married. Der roze Himmel hat vertracht, das schwarze Feld gekuscht. Und wenn es gekommen Nacht, ist der Himmel offen Feld gelegen. Und so gelegt zu der Erd sein heiße Brust und gesättigt sie a ganze Nacht mit dir Saffen von sein Leib. Und früh morgen hat der Himmel Sonnenschein gespielt auf dem Körper von sein schwarzer Weib, auf dem Körper von sein schwarzer Weib. Thank you. So I sang that in harmony with a cis man, as some of you will know Benji Fox Rosen, and he's also a tenor. So the vocality that's being delivered from a self-masculinized voice and a cis male voice singing this song together in a decommissioned church in Austria for for Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens was very good. This is what I've been trying to do with Yiddish in general, whether it's privately, you know, at how do you say that? Rites of passage moments, or for Bikur Cholim, or for queer audiences. And if it's not officially a queer audience, like my situation in Pauline, there'll be at least one person who needed to hear that in a particular way. And I'm usually singing to that one person, no matter how many people are there. And scene. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tobaron. Amazing presentation, and I'm very happy somebody asked for a performance at the end of your presentation.
Thank you very, very much. It's really, really a treat to be here with people who understand what you're saying.
Also very happy you're doing this project in Warsaw. It's
Thank you.
You know, very exciting for me personally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tobaron. And I think at this point I'll pass the mic to Faith, who will conclude the project, right, that we started at the beginning of today's evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to Zohar and Tobaron for these beautiful ruminations on how we walk through the world as queer people. And it's just so moving to me to hear these personal reflections on journeying through the world in our bodies and with love for ourselves. We did make a map. So here is our map of queer Yiddishland. And oh, let's see if I can reload it. Okay, can I get it back? Here we are. So it is having a bit of a fit. What I noticed in the map, I'm just going to keep talking while I try to get it to reload. What I noticed in the map was that people had a lot of things to say about their places, and I wasn't able to capture that all in the columns that I had given you. So so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add another column because when you mouse over these places, you can see the data that people have given you. And so I want to add some of the other information that you gave me that I didn't think of, that I didn't know was going to come forward. For example, a number of people gave their place names in the indigenous way. And for mapping, I have to use the, for example, the Canadian way to map things. So I'm not able to use the indigenous names. So I'm going to add a field. So it would also show down here, it would show those indigenous names that people gave me. And also it was really, a few people put in something very, very specific, and I will have to go and get the latitude and longitude for those places. And instead, I just gave a more general place. So for this one, I had to just give a more general place, but I can go in and I can put in the exact latitude and longitude, which will map it to the exact place that you wanted it to be. To thank all of you for, I love seeing our places all over the world, our spaces that we inhabit with our queerness, with our Yiddishkeit, and I'm going to perfect the data that you gave me. In some places, I've given you a Yiddish name. I'll finish giving Yiddish names to all the places, and then I will re-upload it, and I will send that on to Yevgeny and Maria to share out. So thank you so much to everybody for taking part in this mapping project and for making space for ourselves in the world.
Thank you so much, Faith. Looking forward to getting this file and looking closely and sharing it with people. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. So if you have questions for our speakers, please, you can type your questions and then we will voice them, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question to one or all of our speakers.
Arn has a question. I'll read it out loud, and I think I have an answer. Maybe somebody else in the audience would also like to answer. So the question goes, why does it seem that almost every LGBTQ event these days about being transgender? Is there no place anymore for events in our community and movement for those of us who do not identify as transgender? Thank you for your question. Well, I actually think that this is not solely transgender focused events. First of all, this is an event of Yiddishland Pavilion, and Yiddishland Pavilion is a multi-vocal platform, as we're trying to keep it as such. And I think that today's event also had multiple voices that we've heard. I've had a great pleasure to hear. And I think it was very inclusive and included multiple positions. So I wouldn't say that we're focusing on something, just one theme or one agenda or one point of view. I think we're actually, very diverse in the voices that we all are presenting here. Maybe somebody would like to add something to this, Celia.
I could add something.
Please do.
I have been all the letters of the rainbow. And I resent, frankly, that it's assumed how I identify based on my health history, a small portion of which I shared with you during this tiny presentation. That said, we can still, be friends. you know, hang out and do gay shit together if you want. And just saying, don't assume, and rather, you know, it might feel this way to you because it's very recent that trans people get included in anything, so it kind of sticks out. But for me, like, I came out as trans almost 30 years ago, and I've seen a lot of different things change. There have been scenarios where gays and lesbians, by which I mean cis people, have threatened us, taken our jobs away, kicked us out of museums and bars. Doesn't matter how well you suck cock. Okay, I've seen trans guys get kicked out of gay men's spaces, and we've all seen trans women thoroughly, you know, harassed and people trying to ruin their lives who are cis and identify as feminists. So I would encourage you to, you know, get to know some more trans people and go and do gay things with them. Even host an all-gay Yiddish shmuas. Some of the guys who show up might be trans, maybe even me. Some of the guys might not be trans, you know. Just try to think more expansively about it, and you're casting a wider net.
I didn't mean to be rude or to offend anyone. It just seems that every single LGBT event these days is about being transgender or is about transgender people. I mean, every event that I see pop up in so many different venues, whether it's film festivals or whether it's films or whether it's that just seems to be what's happening these days. And I understand your point about trans people, you know, becoming more visible these days as opposed to the way it was years ago. But honestly, it's just so predominant that almost every LGBT event is about trans people. It makes me feel like I might as well be straight.
So I have something to say about this as well, and I don't want our event to end up being only about this one question, but I do have something to say about this, which is I am reminded of being a lesbian in the 1980s and struggling to get the word L into the rainbow. It was just G. There was only G. G is what existed.
Right.
And struggling to have women accepted as part of a gay community, a queer community. And how difficult it was for men to hear that, that we needed to actually be in control of our own movement. And I heard this complaint, you know, numerous times from men. Why is there so much about women? Don't we matter anymore? When really it was not that women were taking over at all. It was that we just wanted the right to be present, to be seen, to have our voices matter, all of those things. So I think the thing to look at here, Aaron, honestly, is your own reaction. The thing to look at is why do I feel invisible when other people are made visible? Why, you know, is there something actually hurting me in this, or
no, it's not.
am I just
it just seems that every LGBT event now is about being trans, and it's about trans people. I mean,
so yeah, so my answer remains the same, Aaron. I think
All right.
I think you have to look inside.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Faith. So I want to add that I think the comment was out of order, and I think it makes me, as the co-curator of the Yiddishland.
I'm sorry if I offended anyone. I'm very, very sorry.
A few more events.
Not my intention to offend anyone.
The representation of Yiddishland trans artists. So Marshall, it looks like we have a lot of work to do. So So I'm wondering if there are any other questions for our speakers. So I think I have one question, maybe if there are no more questions. I'm wondering, so the developments in queer and feminist Yiddishlands do not necessarily coincide with developments in the Alterheim, right? In Eastern, in terms of queerness and feminism in Eastern Europe. And I'm wondering if some of our speakers today, in particular, Zohar and Tobaron, could speak about this dynamic over the last 10 years so, or maybe even longer, the developments in Yiddishland as far as acceptance of issues of gender and sexuality, and how it coincides or becomes problematic once Yiddishland returns to the Alterheim, right? Or when artists of the Yiddishland go to the Alterheim. And perhaps Faith could also add to this as well.
If I mean, I can start just by saying, you know, my queer Yiddish practice completely emerged from this Alterheim. So it was completely inspired by being in a surrounding of queer and feminist Polish women specifically. So it feels like it came organically from there. But I like also the phrasing of your question in terms of historical trajectory. And I think something to learn from looking at, I mean, specifically Poland, probably also Hungary, is the kind of non-linear nature of queer liberation and this feeling of making progress, gaining rights and visibility, and then experiencing a lot of backlash. I know it's happening other places, but I think it's immeasurable to what's been going on in Eastern and Central Europe. And I think that that's something to be wary of, say, watching what's going on in the States, sort of to realize how delicate progress is. I mean, I don't like the word progress, but I like safety and visibility and opportunity. So watching backlash and politics shift so dramatically, I think is something that the conjunction of queerness in Eastern Europe really shows us. And that said, one last time to go to Margolin's poem is also the idea that that this too can change, and that we can also maybe be open to possibilities that we don't know to predict yet for Yiddish, for Yiddishland, for Eastern Europe, for queer life. So the fact that things can get better and worse allows us to connect to this very queer, non-linear form of time and history, and though it's very dark now, also leave room for different optimistic possibilities.
I'm not sure what I have to say about this question. I have never been to Eastern Europe. I've never been to Israel. I have no physical experience of being in those places. All my experiences of those places are imaginary. And so I feel like there's a way in which that's almost a liberation in itself. That I'm coming into this work from just from myself, just from my body. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
If I understand what Faith is saying, not to put words in your mouth, but perhaps there's like an internal, how do you say that, internality component to Yiddishland. If Yiddishland then is not about it is going to be diasporist and not about explicit addresses, then maybe it is, you know, as valid that it's not place tethered in the case of Faith Jones. I don't know if I understood all of your question, but I'll say that in the limited experience that I've had here so far, even though there have been moments and there have been artworks, contemporary artworks that are innovating new angles Jewishly. Anytime I mentioned to anybody here that Yiddish is my parents' first language, they looked at me like I was a hologram. And they were really, really shocked and like couldn't pick their jaw up off the floor. And it's awkward, as I don't know what to say at that point, because it's sort of death adjacent kind of moment. Yes, I'm really here, you know. Like I don't know what to say to that. So presenting works that are that aspire to be effective decolonial gestures by choosing to use Yiddish as an artist's tool. People get it after you sort of unpack it in that theoretical way, but they're not immediately attuned to interface with a live Yiddish voice. And when they understand that it's a transsexual speaking to them in Yiddish, it's too much. So it's like it's too intersectional, and it's not the intersectionality we want. That's just been this summer in Poland. So I can't speak on behalf of more than that. When I first started making work that was simultaneously trans and Jewish, a lot of curators in the West were quite annoyed because what they would prefer, you know, you're supposed to be making porn, or there are things you're supposed to be doing with that. What are you doing Palestine for now? Like, people were annoyed because, and this is also, I don't want to open up a new can of worms with Aaron Borstein, but I'll say that sometimes the opportunity to expose artists, media, events, whatever, depending on how the funding is coming together, you know, the presenter has to check their boxes. So there can be something that is au courant or in vogue for whatever reason, they get some airtime. And it feels like a new thing because it's not yet standard. It hasn't, you know, until we are all free, moments like this will feel new and strange. You know? In my case, I use Yiddish with a lot of, like, I really impretzel myself and consult with a lot of different people. My mother's usually like the last, the final threshold, the seal of approval, in the sense that not because she's involved in contemporary art, but does this really mean what I think it means? Am I misrepresenting something? Have I been appropriative of my own resources? And so I keep making the kind of work that I do and see who vibes with it because of cultural overlap. I don't expect it to be shown in Jewish venues, especially not in Canada. It's officially not, I've already been told, not going to be shown in the few Jewish venues that we have. So there's only a few places that I'm aware of, or a few contexts that I'm aware of, that I've been interested in a contemporary encounter with Yiddish, outside of, our own overlapping orbits of Yiddish music and Yiddish poetry, etc. I don't, beyond what I've suggested so far, I don't know why that is, but I look forward to those overlaps. Like those are positive spaces.
I think so. Thank you, everyone. Just because it's getting so dark behind Tobaron's back, I understand that we probably must wrap up.
It's always dark behind my back.
So thank you very much, everyone, for this wonderful panel that actually, I think, raised much more questions than answers. But I think that's good, because that, as Jenny said, we still have lots of work to do. And I'll be super happy, and we'll be super happy to be doing this work together with you. So thank you very much for joining. Please stay tuned. Please stay updated for our following events, and we'll be happy to be seeing you in the future. And have a wonderful evening or day, depending on wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us.